Well, so good to be back with you. My name is Jeff Fuller, Jay Fuller Interviews on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. And so if you want to check out the YouTube channel, Jay Fuller Interviews, feel free to do so. Follow and like on Facebook or Twitter, Jay Fuller Interviews. We'd love to have you. And now the Backfire podcast with Jeff Fuller of Jay Fuller Interviews on Google Podcasts and Apple iTunes. You can certainly like, subscribe, share with others, as I believe people's stories make our stories much better if we will take the time and make the time to listen and learn from one another, to unlearn what we thought was right, to relearn what is right. And one now with a tremendous story is Dennis Mellen. Dennis, welcome in.
Thanks, Jeff, for having me on. I really appreciate you for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah, and I'm excited to get going. And the first thing that I have a question about is your website, beabean.net. Where did that come from?
Well, it's a little play on words here. As a leader, you have a lot of influence on what you do with your team, with your organization. And it's very similar to the experience that a coffee bean goes through when it's in that boiling pot of water that is business or is athletic competition. And the idea of the leader is you're the bean that gets into that water and changes it from ordinary water into gourmet coffee.
And something to be said about the process that a bean goes through is it gets destroyed to bring great flavor. And I think sometimes in life we have to go through things that bring out the best in us. This last year with the pandemic, how did you refocus or gain a clarifying focus on doing what you do now?
Well, just like everybody else, once we started getting locked down, I kind of tossed my hands up in the air and went, what do I do now? I mean, I can't, my business is meeting people and shaking hands. And I'm a hugger when it comes to once I'm familiar with you, and all of that was gone. So it required me to do some pivoting, and I got some motivation from my brother-in-law. He's a musician, a professional musician, plays the violin. And all of his gigs basically dried up. But instead of going, oh, poor me, he pivoted to, I saw him one day where he was giving lessons to 5 students in Sweden over a Zoom call. I go, hey, there's a guy that knows how to pivot and take advantage of an opportunity or taking that adversity and changing it into an opportunity. So that's what motivated me to get back into using Zoom and or writing. So
yeah, and there's so much that can be learned, and it's a true test, not of character, but I think of maturity, how quickly we can pick ourselves up and learn from failing or from whatever adversity comes. You mentioned you are a hugger. I am as well, and being a pastor, it's always the shoulder hug, the most appropriate hug. I had an opportunity to interview Dan Horwitz, danhorwitz.com, if you want to go back and check out that interview. But he said the importance of physical touch is a necessity, especially as we come out of isolation. Can you just address that? Appropriate touch is what we're speaking of. But there is something about physical contact. And within a local church, somebody said the only time a senior citizen is hugged is when they're able to gather at a local house of worship. How important is physical touch? Why is it so important?
Well, I think that's where you make the direct connection with somebody. It's like, I don't want to get into energy fields or any of that metaphysical stuff, but it's one of those things of when you really are feeling vulnerable with somebody, when you've gained their trust. And as a pastor, I'm sure that when you give somebody a hug, it's significant. There's a connection there that that goes beyond just the physical touch. There's there's this feel good feeling,
Yeah. So a question for you. You have made the time to write a book, and now there's a website where people can check out Takes More Than Heart. I love this title, and I'm not blowing smoke because so often I hear people share with students specifically, if you just believe it, you can accomplish it. If your heart's just big enough, and if you're 5'3", non-athletic, you can have the biggest desire and heart to dunk a basketball, but most likely it will not happen. Takes More Than Heart. Where did this title come from?
Well, back in 2008, I was a airline pilot for a major airline, fifth largest air carrier in the United States, Alaska Airlines. One day, I'm flying from Seattle down to San Diego and back, and it's just a stunningly beautiful day, one of those bluebird days. And I'm thinking, here I've been doing this for over 30 plus years, and it's hard work, but it's so exciting. It's something I've wanted to do since 10 years old. Well, the very next day I'm out mountain bike riding, and I have a serious heart attack. And I'm not sure there's another kind, but at where I could not fly anymore. So it was one of those things of, where do I go from here? Where do I find my new purpose? So the title Takes More Than Heart comes from that metamorphosis, or that fall down 7 times, get up 8 times, to find my new purpose. So the book is about finding that new purpose, and I hope it's a guide or a shortcut for people, with some hints of how to talk to yourself, how to pick yourself up for the 8th time after you've fallen down 7 times.
That's really good. I just want to backtrack a little bit. When I was 7 years old, I wanted to be an Air Force pilot. I just thought flying would have been wonderful. Academics and eyesight. I always blame eyesight, but I probably didn't have or put my mind to the study as I should. So that went in a different direction. What caused you to want to become a pilot?
Oh, well, as corny as this sounds, my dad was in the Air Force. So at 10 years old, I'm standing at his Air Force base, looking up at the sky and seeing these Air Force airplanes flying overhead. And I'm going, hey, that's pretty cool. That's what I want to do when I grow up. Of course, my wife will claim that I haven't reached that point yet. But from 10 years old, unlike most kids, I had a signalness of purpose. I wanted to be a professional pilot, whether it was in the Air Force or in the airlines. And so everything from 10 years old until my heart attack at 56 was oriented towards being a professional pilot. And then all of a sudden, boom, I can't fly anymore. And now I'm faced with the same thing that the 18-year-old does when they're finishing their last 2 years of high school. What do I do from here? Do I enter the workforce? What school do I go to? What college do I pick? What major, So I kind of took the inverted life cycle, if you will. I became an 18-year-old at 56. Unfortunately, I still had the same 56-year-old body,
So Dennis Mellen making some time. If you're listening on the podcast, the Backfire podcast with Jeff Fuller of J Fuller Interviews, beabean.net, beabean.net is where you can find more information. But Dennis, Alaska, my dad, who right now I'm here in Vermont, which we have the Green Mountains. It's beautiful. But my dad has always said that he would love to visit Alaska. Can you just talk about what you've been able to see in life, not proverbially or figuratively, but literally, as you've been able to fly and see this beautiful country? What are some things that stand out regarding the opportunities you have had?
Well, it's always one of those cases of you're up at 35,000 feet when things finally settle down after a takeoff, and you're kind of looking at the terrain around there. I can remember even on that last day, my last flight, looking down on the city of Eugene, Oregon, and going, hey, look at all those people down there. I wonder what they're thinking about. And of course, I smiled to myself because I figure they're down on the ground going, hey, look at those guys up there. I wonder what they're thinking about, But yeah, you can see some of the, to be able to see from the air how big this country is and how beautiful some of the areas, or all of the areas, even if it's that stark beauty of the flat tundra of Alaska, or some of the islands in the island chain, the Aleutian chain, or going up and down the west coast, seeing the mountains, Mount Shasta, Mount Rainier, Mount Baker, all those, or the Rockies, or how vast the plains are. It's just, it's really, I think one of the most inspiring things is to watch a line of thunderstorms at night and watch the lightning go in between clouds and how it lights up like, what is it? the Mexican candle lamps that they put in the bags.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like. It's really pure, motivating, and it's just pure beauty to see.
So, Dennis, you do a lot of leadership training now, and I have heard speakers and they talk about the 35,000-foot view, but then bringing it down home, close to home, being practical. Has that helped you, having that experience of seeing from 35,000 feet literally to bringing things home? Have you been able to connect the dots for people in leadership training, whereas perhaps other leaders, speakers have not?
Yeah, I think so, because you get to see really how small and insignificant one person is, because you can't pick them out on the ground from 35,000 feet.
Yeah.
But it also gives you that that feeling of taking care of the next mile on your flight. Or I like to use the analogy of if you and I are driving from where I live in Chicago down to Disney World, there's a lot of different ways we can go. We can go through Knoxville, we can go through Memphis, we can go through Nashville. Some are shorter routes, some are longer routes, some are more scenic. But along the way, there's going to be road closures and traffic accidents, things like that. But really, you keep that vision of arriving at Disney World in mind. But as you're driving, you have to take care of the next 200 feet. And once you take care of that, you have to take care of the next 200 and the next 200. So it's trying to get that across to people so that they can realize that as long as they have their goal in mind, as long as they're advancing, eventually they're going to reach their destination, whatever their goal is. And I think that's one of the unique things that I present when I do the leadership, because every leader has a project, every leader has a vision, and how we promote that, with how we inspire workers to work at a level they never dreamed possible, is the essential element of being a leader.
That's really good. And Dennis Mellen, the name of the website, the name of the book is Takes More Than Heart, takesmorethanheart.com. And not getting too personal, but as much as you want to share, what led to that heart attack? Was it something hereditary, or was it something that you had no idea was coming? And so what led to the heart attack, but how difficult was it for you during that time of recovery to refocus?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up. It was, again, another one of those bluebird days in outside of Seattle, where I pick out a trail. I mountain bike 2-3 times a week. Sometimes I go out for 3 or 4 hours, and I found this hill and actually on the trail map it's called It's a Bitch, and it's a it's a 500-foot climb within a mile with a bunch of switchbacks. And
wow,
I'm huffing and puffing up there, and all of a sudden I'm not feeling too good, and I stop, swing my leg over the bike, and down. Next thing I know, I'm down on all fours, and the last thing I remember is I projectile vomit, roll over on my back, and start going, "What's happening? What's happening?" And that's the last thing I remember. Luckily, 2 hikers happened upon me. They called the 911, and the medics came up. They came up that same hill, humping about 100 pounds of equipment, get me on a portable gurney, and start me down the hill. And from the time of the hill to the hospital, they end up having to shock me about 25 times to get my heart back into sequence there, and about another 25 times in the ER. Luckily, I survived that. And, there may be some doubt as to the mental capacity, but I think I'm fully functional. The next few months were really tough, because I was contemplating, what do I do now? What's the next thing I do? I was devastated, because since 10 years old, that's all I wanted to do. And I had this neighbor, Gary Todd, that came and talked to me that had something similar happen to me. And basically it was not so much tough love, but love tough. He was, he was loving me, but he was telling me, "Hey, what are you going to do? Are you going to retire to Geezerville in a Barker Lounger with a cool drink, a remote, and wondering whether you're going to watch Oprah or some Blue Bloods reruns or something, or you're going to get off your duff and go do something. So that's what got me going back. The fall down 7 times, give up 8 times. And so I went through a series of jobs after that. But I have to say that to this day, even when I go back and read that section of the book, I can get a big lump in my throat because it was definitely an epiphany for me. It changed the way I looked at things.
So I had the good fortune of interviewing James Donaldson, former center for the Seattle Supersonics, played in the NBA several years, and he had a major health issue, and he talked about going from a professional athlete to losing his health to even having suicidal ideations. And James has become a good friend and just shares openly. When you find people that don't make the turn that you did, but look more towards disappointment, discouragement, or even depression, with your best leadership training, how important is it to have those friends that show you that, well, love tough, as you say?
Yeah, I tell you, they're an essential part of any recovery. Anybody that stays isolated after having something major happen to them, whether it's a career-ending athletic injury or a business failure or a heart attack, you've got to have a support system. You've got to have friends that will not just, oh, poor Dennis, you went through this, but will actually give you a kick in the seat. You know what I'm saying? Hey, you've got more to give here. So that was what helped me. As I 2 of my best friends, Tom Kemp and Ken Adams, helped me through a lot of this. But I'll have to say that it was definitely my wife that helped me the most out of this.
Takes More Than Heart is the name of the book, takesmorethanheart.com. Talk to me about this writing process. I mentioned off air that I would love to write a book. I think that everybody does have a book within them, but putting pen to paper and having that consciousness of there needs to be thought, but sometimes you can overthink it. What was that writing process for you? Are you a natural? Did it come easy?
Well, yes and no, but Jeff, you're talking old style, pen to paper, pencil to paper. I mean, I did more Word documents and stuff, but yeah, it was interesting. I knew I'd been encouraged by a lot of my friends to write this story, to talk about the things that I'd gone through to help people out. But I kept thinking, I don't want to write a book where, it's a poor Dennis, look at what he went through. I wanted it to be something that was hopeful and optimistic, looking forward to the next challenge. And when I finally found the time to sit down and do it, I wrote out a little timeline and I started writing this and that. And I get to a point and I go, oh, I wonder how many words this is. And it's about 40 pages. And I go, oh man, I've got to come up with a lot more. And to tell you the truth, I'd been journaling since the heart attack in 2008. And I said, well, let me take a look at this journal. And I look at, oh, here's this little story here. That fits here. Oh, here's another little story. And it just started being like almost a plug and play. I had to adjust, obviously, tenses and things like that. But, and I had some editors that helped me. But all of a sudden now, the book is 160 pages, and from what I'm gathering, it's making a difference with a lot of people, and I'm getting a lot of good feedback on it. So that in itself has made it worthwhile. With you have to make some investment into it, pay money for. I went with a hybrid press company where it was like an a la carte thing. If you want this, it's this how much it costs, and. So one of the things was now I got to the promotional part, which is actually the hardest part. And I thought, well, I keep pouring money into this. So I went with a GoFundMe. And I thought, well, I'll see what I can get. Yeah. And all of a sudden I got all these friends and acquaintances and everything, and they're donating money. And now I've got a war chest for promotion. And it was pretty gratifying. I just had to, I gave away books to everybody that donated a certain amount, but um, they at least they're signed, you know.
Yeah. And it's refreshing to know that people believe in you enough to believe in your book and to invest in you. And sometimes we wonder with a leadership training that you are an expert, you are the one that people go to see, you are the professional. But I want to know, who are you learning from as you're taking that knowledge and providing wisdom to others?
There's not a single person that you come in contact with that you can't pick up a little nugget from. If nothing else, it's like, well, I just bumped into Dennis Mellen and he does such and such. That's something I'm never going to do, you know, or he treated people like this and that's something I'm never going to do. So each person that you come in contact, there's a nugget. You learn to relate, how to inspire them to perform at a level they never thought possible. But the actual ones where I felt like, man, I can really make a difference with this is going through the John Gordon Power Positive Leadership training. That made a huge difference as I got certified to deliver his message. There's a lot of other ways. John Maxwell, Jack Canfield, all those guys have certifications, and they're all good, and they all have a certain philosophy. But there's a common theme through them, and that's inspiring people, making the connection, building relationships so that we can be vulnerable with each other and trust each other.
That's so good. For our church, quick plug for the church I pastor, we say it's important to make time to build relationships into trusted friendships. And it's just time over time that those relationships do become friendships. Question for you is, some people would say, and no offense, but as you get older, some people say, well, you've earned the right to retire. For your frame of mind, where did you learn that it's not about retiring, but it's about continually giving and investing in others?
Well, I don't know if it's a learned thing, but there's just this burning desire to go out and make, that little difference with somebody. If I can connect with Jeff Fuller today and make a little bit of difference, if he takes away something from our talk. I coach high school baseball at the local high school here. And I've always told them that they're part of my 30-year plan. They go, Coach, you're going to be 90-something. I said, well, it's not my 30 years. I said, in 30 years, I want to be that little voice in your head that says, work on this next pitch. What's important next? We got to touch all the bases. Oh, we really hit a home run here. Little nuggets that you instill in them, and they hear that little voice when it comes time for an umpire. You don't like his call. I said, what difference does it make? He's not going to change his mind. Let's move forward from here. Those are the little nuggets that they take on 30 years from now. So that's what inspires me to do that. And when I don't have something to give any longer, then I'll retire to Geezerville and the Barker Lounger.
Dennis, who invested in you when you were 14, 15 years old to kind of help you become this person you are now?
Well, I'm gonna have to say the example my dad set. Being in the Air Force in leadership positions, watching how he interacted with his well, they weren't employees, but I guess you'd call them his airmen. And airwomen at the time too. He did some things that were like leading edge at the time, because it's been a long row to hoe to bring women into an equal status, and we still have work to do. It's you don't build a 4-star general overnight and say, okay, that lady needs to be a 4-star general. And it was only like 6 or 7 years ago, I don't know exactly, and I can't remember her name, where a lady became the first 4-star general combat commander, which is inspiring. She's got a lot to give, but I'm getting a little off topic on what you're talking about. I do have to say it's my dad, my dad, and watching the example. And there's nothing that replaces a lesson than seeing the example that somebody gives you.
That's certainly true. And for some students that do not have fathers actively involved, the coaching is wonderful. And just thank you so much for that. This is Dennis Mellen. Twitter, it's at beabean14, be a bean, the number 14. On Instagram, it's Dennis Mellen Speaks, and that's Mellen. So Dennis Mellen Speaks. Beabean.net is the website. And Dennis, we'll get you out in a couple questions, but I just want to know this about you. Sometimes it's difficult to wake up and write. It seems like it's overwhelming to present another talk to an audience that may or may not be interested. So what is it that keeps you motivated to continue to invest so much value to others?
I think it's still finding the one person in that audience, or that one person that reads your post or your article, that responds. Even one of the the head baseball coach was telling me one time. He says, you don't know when you're making a difference, but 5-6 years down the road, you might be going through one of the grocery stores, and from 9 aisles over, somebody will say, "Hey, coach," and then you go back and relate to him. I think it was, oh man, I'm forgetting his name offhand, but he said, Billy Graham said, coaches will touch more people in a year than most people will touch in a lifetime. And I think that's one of the things that keeps me coaching, whether it's leadership coaching, athletic coaching, or one-on-one coaching.
The name of the book is Takes More Than Heart. Takes More Than Heart. You can find that at takesmorethanheart.com. So I just want you to give your best plug, because I've found out as a pastor, the quickest way to have someone not read a book is if I tell them to read this book. But for you, coming from your own experience, Takes More Than Heart, how cathartic was it for you to write this, and how important is it for you to have others know that there is a way to get up that 8th time?
Well, you talk about finding the time to write. There were times when I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I'd have an idea. And the first couple of times I was going, no, I'll just roll back over. And then the next morning I'd forget it. So there were times I was getting up in the middle of the night and I'd go for 3 or 4 hours solid, just writing ideas down. But it's cathartic from the standpoint of when somebody comes and says, I read your book and it made a difference. I truly believe that that finding the challenge, or finding the opportunity in the challenges that we face, is important. Instead of looking at it's that whole growth mindset thing. When you get to a point where obstacles, challenges, bad things happen, if you just look at what if we're talking spiritually, what God is pointing, what direction He's pointing you. Here's an opportunity to grow, and here's an opportunity to help or make a difference. And I'm sure that you as a pastor are seeing that on a regular basis. That's got to be a really rewarding feeling. And I'm hoping that I capture some of that with people that when they put reviews up on Amazon, when they put reviews up on Goodreads or whatever website that they're commenting on, when they say the exact words aren't important, but something along the lines of it made a difference, or it changed the way I looked at things, or that's what's rewarding. So everybody thinks that you're going to make a lot of money from books, but the money's the side issue. The when you write with passion, it's, did I make a difference? When I give a sermon, did I make a difference with the congregation today?
And I love what John Maxwell says about writing books, that it just increases the influence and opportunity for others to hear the message. And we're just going to zoom in on you close. We have one final question, and this I stole from Hernando Planos' Be Contagious podcast. And that's simply, if, or I guess I should say when, in your case, when the feature film is made about your life, who plays you in that feature film?
Oh, man, it's got to be Brad Pitt.
That works. That works. Dennis, we thank you so much for making the time. Again, the website, beabean.net, beabean.net. You can also look up the book, learn more at takesmorethanheart.com. On Twitter, it's beabean14, the number 14, beabean14. And on Instagram, it's Dennis Mellen Speaks. Dennis, thanks so much for making the time. We wish you all the best. And not only good luck with the sales of the book, but the message that you have to share. I just hope and pray that you gain more of an audience than you ever could imagine, because we all can learn from your story. So, Dennis, thanks so much for making the time.
Thanks for the opportunity, Jeff. I really appreciate the time, and I hope I've made a difference today.
Certainly have. And again, that's Dennis Mellen, and you are listening to Jay Fuller Interviews on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and the Backfire podcast with Jeff Fuller of Jay Fuller Interviews on Apple iTunes, Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, wherever you can listen to a podcast. You can find us there. Like, subscribe, share with others, as people have stories that we all can learn from and most likely must learn from to improve ourselves. Thanks again. We'll talk to you soon. Jeff Fuller's out, and thanks for making the time.